But defendant Donald Trump's project all along has been to distort the truth surrounding this trial, to attack the process, to undermine the judicial system. In yet another last-ditch effort this afternoon, Trump's lawyers tried to get an emergency stay from a New York State appeals court, arguing there was no possible way for Trump to get a fair trial in Manhattan. The response from the district attorney, Alvin Bragg's office, was simple. What the last week has shown is that the jury selection has worked. He continued, we have 18 ordinary New Yorkers who are ready to serve. It would be unfair to them and the public for this trial to be delayed further, end quote. The appeals court judge agreed and quickly rejected Trump's request. Right now, the good news is, amidst all the intensity and the ruckus, the judicial system so far has not bent to Trump's attacks. Despite what he says, the system is working for the former president, just like it would for any other American. At the end of today, a full jury, a 12-member jury with 6 alternates, was seated. Donald Trump's peers, who may ultimately decide whether or not to convict him as a felon. Now, after the jury was selected, the focus turned to what Trump might say, not the lies he spews outside the courtroom, but rather what he might say under oath if he indeed chooses to take the stand. Trump has previously indicated that he plans to testify in this case, and today he's sticking to that story.
President Trump, are you going to testify? Yes.
Now, whether he actually will or not, we shall see. Under New York law, if a criminal defendant wishes to testify in their own defense, they are granted what is known as a Sandoval notice, which ensures that the defendant is aware of the lines of questioning that the prosecution may ask. The purpose is to make sure the defendant is not caught off guard when testifying on the stand. Some of the things the Manhattan DA's office wants to cross-examine Trump about are the 2 civil trials that Trump recently lost, the E. Jean Carroll defamation trial and the New York fraud trial. Judge Merchan said today he would decide on Monday what questions will be permitted during Trump's potential testimony. Monday is also when opening statements and potentially the first witness testimony are set to begin. Joining me now, the aforementioned NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, who's been reporting on the trial, as well as MSNBC legal analyst Catherine Christian, who served as special assistant DA in the Manhattan District Attorney's office. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for being with us. Vaughn, let's start with this Sandoval hearing, this idea that Donald Trump says he will testify in his own defense. He is entitled to know what the line of questioning is, and it's not a given that whatever the DA says he wants to ask is going to be asked. So now the DA, I guess, presents the judge with the lines of questioning, and the judge determines?
Right. This afternoon, the district attorney's office made the case to the judge that a series of other trial determinations, from E. Jean Carroll lawsuit to the civil fraud lawsuit, but also there was a couple years ago, Trump filed a lawsuit against Hillary Clinton and several other defendants, in which he was punished with a $1 million fine for essentially a frivolous lawsuit. And they want to present to the jury each of these different trial determinations to question the credibility of Donald Trump. As the district attorney's office argued today to the judge, they said, look, the defense attorneys for Donald Trump are going to question our witnesses and their credibility, from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels. We should be able to build a body of evidence out beyond this case that shows and questions Donald Trump's veracity of the statements that he makes.
Catherine, let's talk a little bit about these jurors. We have 12 jurors and 6
Can I just make one correction?
Yeah.
Can I make one correction?
Yeah.
It is not to let the defendant know the line of questioning. It's to let the defendant know what prior bad acts they're going to ask him about. The other questions he's going to be surprised about. But anything about, prior judgments or prior bad acts, he has to be made aware of that. Sorry.
Got it. So they do not have to disclose things that are not about his prior bad acts. They can
Exactly.
go with any line of questioning they want. But if they are going to talk about prior things that have happened to Donald Trump or that he has done, then he has to know about that.
Exactly.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. Let's talk about 12 jurors, 6 alternates. That's the maximum number of alternates. Typically speaking, a case doesn't run out of jurors and alternates. But as the pressure continues to be on these jurors and or their identities become known, either because the media doesn't handle this well or for whatever reason, is there any concern that some full complement of jurors doesn't make it to the end of this trial?
Definitely, and that's why Judge Merchan chose the maximum allowed of alternates you're allowed in New York, unless it's a murder one case, 6. You already had one yesterday come back and say, on second thought, she can't handle it. Now there's a weekend, so the hope is the 12 that are seated will still remain strong and say that yes, I can still be fair and impartial. But if they're not, there'll be 6 ready to fill in. Of course, we hope the 6 alternates also will still want to be on the jury and can still remain fair and impartial. And, the judge can and the court can do something about making the jurors feel more secure. I think in this case, which was done in Donald Trump's federal trial, the judge should, and it's going to cost money, but court officers should be protecting them when they go to lunch, maybe in an undisclosed location as a group, and they should be escorted home in groups. Because they have to live in Manhattan, so we're not talking about a long commute. So you're not sequestering them. So they're not staying in a hotel, but you're protecting them during the pendency of this trial.
What, in your opinion, how'd it go, the jury selection? I mean, we got it done inside of a week. Seemed to go with relative haste. Those people who were not going to be jurors were dismissed quickly. What was your sense of it? You were sitting there watching it.
Look, Donald Trump's had the opportunity to go and use their peremptory challenges to eliminate several potential jurors that they questioned. And so Donald Trump, over the course of the next 6-7 weeks, is going to become very familiar with the faces of those 12 jurors and 6 alternates that are in there here. But, when it comes to Donald Trump in the courtroom, over the last year, he's become quite familiar with one, not only from the civil fraud trial, but we've got to go back to the E. Jean Carroll trial just in January of 2024.
Right.
There has been a jury that has heard testimony, granted it was 3 minutes of testimony from Donald Trump, and they did in January determined that $87 million penalty in the E. Jean Carroll defamation suit. So Donald Trump has had a New York jury before rule against him here, and now the question here is, over the course of these 6 to 7 weeks, with that intense pressure that are on these individuals. Of course, we heard them even during their vetting process, if you may, say several of them question, look, I've heard from family and friends, even colleagues who question, am I a juror? And with such identifying, from everything from a neighborhood to their jobs to whether they're married or not, undoubtedly over the weeks ahead, folks are going to become familiar with those closest to them of who these jurors are. Now, for Donald Trump, it's out of his control. It's in the hands of his legal team unless he chooses to testify.
Catherine, let's talk about this business about Donald Trump testifying. He maintains he's going to. Is that good or bad for him, and do you think it'll happen? I
don't think it will happen. He has an absolute right to testify. And unfortunately for his attorneys, they have no control over him, which is another reason why he shouldn't testify. But if he does, I think it will be good for the prosecution case and bad for his case because he's out of control. And this judge will not let him sit there and pontificate. He will have to answer questions. And the judge could just shut him down if he's not following the rules. When I say shut him down, meaning you're off the stand, it's over if he's not following the rules and he's not answering questions. Why? Because there's a jury there. This is not like the civil fraud case where it's just a judge. There's a jury there, and this judge will not allow there to be prejudicial information getting to this jury.
Vaughn, talking about following the rules, there are already some questions about whether Donald Trump's been following the rules in terms of the things that he's been posting. But yesterday, the prosecution the prosecution was supposed to tell the court who they're going to call to the stand on Monday. Yesterday, the defense asked for the first 3 witness names. The prosecution said they didn't trust Donald Trump not to tweet those names, so they said they will give the defense 1 name on Sunday, and, quote, if that should be tweeted, that's the last time we will provide that courtesy. Now, this seems to be a bit of back and forth between the Trump defense team and the prosecutor. Is the judge sounded in on this?
Yes. Judge Merchan, when Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's attorney, went to the judge looking for that request, and Todd Blanche said, well, I can affirm that my client, Donald Trump, is not going to post on social media about the names of these witnesses. And Judge Merchan said, I don't know if we can trust your representation on behalf of your client.
Right.
Essentially a head nod not saying you may good faith be making that statement.
Right.
But we have all seen Donald Trump operate, and we don't know if we can trust that. So what they have allowed is on Monday, the prosecution, they said out of respect and deference for the legal team, they will provide the name of the witness that will come forward on Monday. Court will be abbreviated for Passover on Monday. It'll only go till 2 p.m. Eastern. So we are expecting the initial questioning of this witness, but then the cross-examination will not begin until at least Tuesday.
How does that work practically, Catherine? I mean, at some point, the witnesses will be known. So what's the goal here? And what's the assurance that the court has to have from Donald Trump about what he will not do as it relates to witnesses? Because in theory, there will be a series of witnesses whom we will know about.
Well, there's a gag order, which, in my opinion, he's been violating. And there's a hearing on that on Tuesday. So typically, when you have a normal case and you have a defendant who is not like Donald Trump, you give over the witness list to the defense and you say, and you announce in court, tomorrow we're going to call Mr. Jones, Ms. Smith, and if there's time, Ms. Christian. So the defense will know. And you do that as a courtesy so they can prepare their cross-examination. But in this case, and the prosecutors are right to do this, you don't want to do that with this particular defendant because you don't want him, as they said, tweeting about them and intimidating them before they take the stand. Because the same way we're concerned about jurors being afraid to come to court, the same thing will happen with witnesses. They don't want that to happen to them because when Donald Trump tweets negatively about people, his followers, some of them, tend to attack those people.
It'll be an interesting few days to watch. Thank you to both of you. We appreciate it. Catherine Christian is an MSNBC legal analyst. Vaughn Hilliard is an NBC News correspondent. We appreciate your time tonight. After months of delay, it looks like the House will finally pass much-needed foreign aid for the embattled nation of Ukraine. Today, the House voted 316 to 94 to allow for separate votes on bills to fund Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. It now looks like the House will pass each of those aid bills tomorrow, or they'll certainly try to, but the drama in the House is far from over. Today, the far-right Arizona Congressman Paul Gosar announced that he would be joining his colleagues Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie of Kentucky in supporting a measure to oust the Speaker, Mike Johnson, which is a so-called motion to vacate. If all Democrats vote together against the Speaker, Mike Johnson can only afford to lose 2 Republican votes to save his seat. And Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher is expected to leave Congress sometime after this weekend's votes, after which the Speaker, Johnson, can only afford to lose a single vote. Despite that razor-thin margin, the Speaker is projecting confidence that he's going to stay in the job.
Are you worried about your job?
No, don't worry. I just do my job.
Is it time to call MTG's bluff and just put the motion to vacate on the floor?
Look, we'll see what happens. I'm going to do my job. I'm not deterred by threats, and we're going to do the right thing and let the chips fall where they may.
With three Republicans now seemingly committed to ousting Johnson, the Speaker will need help from Democrats in order to stay in his job. So will any of them help him? Today, the House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries kept reporters in suspense about what he and his caucus plan to do.
At the appropriate time, as House Democrats, we will have a conversation about how to deal with any hypothetical motion to vacate. Moskow, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Massie, and Gosar are quite a group, and I'm sure that will play some role in our conversation.
Joining us now, Congressman Jim Himes, Democrat of Connecticut and the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us. What a several months this has been. Mike Johnson went from being a backbencher to somebody who's now privy to sensitive intelligence about our foreign adversaries. I don't know. Did that contribute to his change of heart on the need to pass this Ukraine aid bill? Because he was a holdout himself.
Yeah, I think it did. I really think it did. And look, I don't think I agree with Speaker Johnson on anything political. But I will say that he said 2 months ago, we're going to pass the budget. And we had a whole, freak out over whether there could be a shutdown. He said we would pass 702 FISA, which we did last week in the House, and now I think we're going to pass UK and Israel as supplemental, and it has all gotten done. So again, I don't think I agree with a thing he thinks politically, but he appears to do what he says he's going to do, and he's gotten stuff done. And yes, of course, he's going to be threatened by, I love the way Hakeem put it, quite a group, the absolute most fringy members of Congress.
So talk to me about the logic. And some of the logic is, I suppose, when the election comes around, Democrats can say the business of America needs to be done, and we supported the business of America being done. On the other hand, Mike Johnson has been, and continues to be an election denier, an ally of Donald Trump's. What's in it for Republicans to help him?
You mean Democrats?
I'm sorry. Yes. What's in it for Democrats? Thank you.
Is for us to be. Yeah, and in fact, I think his problem is maybe more with Republicans than it is with Democrats. But the answer, Ali, is very, very clear, which is we demonstrated in the last Congress that we are the bipartisan party of getting stuff done. We got the bipartisan infrastructure law done after it was a joke for years and years. We got the Inflation Reduction Act, which, capped insulin at $35 a month for diabetics. I could go on about this. The PACT Act, which protected our veterans. We showed in the last Congress that almost everything we accomplished was bipartisan. And then in this Congress, imagine going into November and being able to say that the only reason in the last Congress anything got done, that a government shutdown was averted, that Ukraine aid was provided, et cetera, was because the Democrats were willing to work with a speaker who, just as you say, is ideologically everything that we do not believe in. But you asked a political question. What's in it for us is to demonstrate time and time again that we're about getting things done for the American people, not about partisan posturing or social media antics a la Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Is there an abiding fear? Do you think about or worry about or care that if Mike Johnson disappears, someone less palatable shows up in his job?
Well, what we know for sure, because we've seen this movie before when Kevin McCarthy was defenestrated, what we know for sure is that means a period of abject chaos. It was 3 weeks in the case of Speaker McCarthy before Mike Johnson was finally voted in. And look, there is a tension. There is a tension here, right? I mean, it is not our job as Democrats to save Republicans from their manifest dysfunction. On the other hand, if you set aside our partisan interest, which I think we regularly do, we are about delivering. And so we delivered the rule today. More Democrats voted for a Republican rule. This is unheard of, Ali. More Democrats voted for a Republican rule than Republicans did. And I think that in tomorrow, we will be the margin of victory for aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel, and humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza.
Now, in order to do that, to save Mike Johnson and to get what you just said, the aid to Ukraine, aid to Taiwan, aid to Israel, do Democrats discuss now wanting more out of this deal? I mean, like they would if this were a minority government in a parliamentarian in a parliamentary situation. I mean, is this going to be on a piecemeal basis for these three bills, or is there going to be a larger discussion between Hakeem Jeffries and leadership and Mike Johnson's team to say this is what going forward looks like for us?
Yeah, I think that conversation is inevitable because tomorrow I think we will pass all these bills with a supermajority, and that's a whole other conversation. Imagine a majoritarian body in a democracy held up by 3 or 4 fringe members, and then when the vote actually happens on Ukraine or Israel, you have a massive majority in support. But to your question, yes, there's very little doubt in my mind that after these things pass, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Paul Gosar or one of those guys is going to call for a motion to vacate. Now, we won't have to deal with it tomorrow. We'll deal with it when we come back. But yes, that's the moment when we say, when presumably Speaker Johnson goes to Hakeem Jeffries and say, hey, look, who knows what's going to happen? I could be replaced with somebody you can't work with. We could have weeks and weeks and weeks of dysfunction. Let's talk about what the Democrats do to protect my job. That'll be fascinating. And you labeled it exactly what it would be. It would be a sort of a coalition government, which, by the way, will be appalling to a lot of members of the majority. But guess what, guys? You had a majority and you screwed it up. So, I think there's a conversation to be had there. Obviously, it will be had by Hakeem Jeffries. And, look, I'm a pragmatist. So if that results in us getting more things done on the other side of this Ukraine vote, that's something we should absolutely consider.
Thank you, sir, for your analysis and your time. We always appreciate it. Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut is the House Intelligence Committee ranking member. Thank you, sir. Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.